Hello, we're here in the beautiful Bunya Mountains today and we're doing a little bit of an educational spiel about fungi. I just wanted to stop at this spot because we have this big piece of wood. It's so soft, it's really soft and you can just pick that off and touch and squish. It's like paper. That's all we've got left here now. See how easy that was? So what we've got here is a white rot fungus that would have created this. And all that means is that the harder tissue has been decomposed by fungi that can actually digest lignin. And lignin is what makes trees grow really tall and really hardy, the hardy tissue that allows trees to grow tall. It's one of the most hardest substances made by nature, in nature. And when you decompose all the lignin when you're a fungi, you will leave this white rot. So it's kind of whitish, and it means cellulose is left over, and it's really light. And you can see how it just powders it. It's almost down to this lovely, almost soil, like it's sawdust, nature's sawdust. And this is because the fungi have eaten all the hardy tissue, all the lignin, and left this beautiful, powdery, lovely to feel cellulose and lignin now mixed together, and you've got this powdery loveliness. But that's what happens. You first need to either eat the lignin or the cellulose, and if you're a white rotter, you will be classified as eating the lignin. And if you're a brown rotter, you'll leave the brown rot behind, which everything is brown and hardy, very hard, and I'll show you an example of that. And that's called the brown rot fungi. So basically decomposers that eat different parts of the tissue that's left behind from a dead tree. So yeah, next time you go for a walk, make sure you have a feel, and when you can feel that it's, I can put my finger in there, like it's so like tissue paper. And that's exactly what tissue paper is made out of, cellulose. So beautiful stuff. And this is how all these nutrients then get returned back into soil, churned by the fungi and feeding the microorganisms to create soils. So yeah.
White rot fungi decompose lignin, leaving the white, soft cellulose behind. Brown rot fungi decompose cellulose, leaving the brown, hard lignin behind.
So these would have fruited at some point. It's probably now gone to a level where either the moisture's not in there, but the mycelium that's going throughout this will actually fruit as well at times. I can't see, oh, there's some mycelium here actually. So if the conditions were right and there's still enough nutrient left in here, still enough cellulose sort of for the fungi to thrive in, for the mycelium, that's the white part here. So this should be filled with mycelium actually, and you can see that sort of these white bits, but it's very dry at the moment. See these little burrowing insects as well. These are like probably some beetle or some other borer that can continuously now help this decomposition process. So it's working together. You can see here as well, there's lots of burrowing. Here we go, we've got more mycelium here. All that white is the fungi doing their work. This mycelium is made up of tiny threads of hyphae. And these hyphae are basically these cells of the fungi that keep excreting exudates or like enzymes and acids to break down the wood basically. So by having these strong enzymes, they can break down even rock, some of them. And so this is quite amazing, and that's how soils are created. You're breaking down the organic matter and rocks and things like that, and bigger particles to make them into minerals to feed the rest of the forest. You can see how much symbiosis, there's just so many different organisms in here. We're only looking at the mycelium here, but all this means borers going in there, all acting to actually decompose this wood back down to the ground to feed the forest. Beautiful stuff. I mean, it's just what dreams are made of, Beautiful, soft as, all the lignin's gone. Look how brittle it is, so beautiful, and smells wonderful, of course, as well. And there's just so much life probably in here that we're not, if we were to look under the microscope, we would see all kinds of creatures actually living in there as well. Things like cockroaches and things like that actually need it, and termites that, creatures that actually do help the fungi to do the job. They're called shredders. So the fungi are just the beginning, and then they help all the other organisms to do the work. And then inside the organisms, like the shredding insects, you also have, and other arthropods, not just insects, like millipedes and things like that. They also have fungi in their gut that do another job to help them digest the cellulose inside of themselves as well. So you've got this huge symbiotic potential and so much going on, and we hardly even get to see this part, you know, like how many of us walk around the forest and pull things apart to see what's in them, you know? And on the other hand, you don't want to destroy the thing either, but it's so great to show, like, the white bits is what's causing all this. Such small and thin cells to do such powerful work, you know? Yes, what were you going to ask?
So are the fungi like the first responders? They come and they're the first ones to act on a dead piece of wood?
Yes, from my understanding, yes, that's what happens.
So that other...
Yes, and in fact you have, even when you go up a tree and you're in the canopy, you'll see fungi already growing, already doing their work, being ready for when a storm comes or the branch breaks or an animal breaks it or somehow a branch dies. That workforce is already present, the spores are already there, and sometimes you can see the fungi fruiting already, and then they thump to the ground and we think, oh, they're just grown on the ground. That's what I used to think until I went up in that canopy on a big fig tree and saw that this life is already happening up there. Already the workforce is put into place. Everything's ready for the tree to be decomposed.
So is it having a purpose while it's alive? While the tree's still alive? Like before it's dead wood?
It depends. There are fungi that are called endophytes, living inside a living tree. And what they do is help the tree to grow and protect it from predators and do all kinds of amazing stuff like drought resistance and things like that. So these guys are waiting there as well already, and when the tree signals that it's dying or a part of it is dying, these endophytic fungi now become decomposer fungi. But not all are the same. Some are just decomposers and they're just waiting there with their spores, and when the conditions are right and it's, you know, the wood is actually dead and there's enough moisture in the wood, that's when decomposition starts happening, and that's how branches are able to fall down to the ground. Isn't it wonderful?
Wow.
Anyway, let's move on to our next little interesting bit of the forest.
Okay. So what have we found here, Sandra?
So here is an example of actually the harder tissue being left and being decomposed now. So the cellulose is now gone by the white rotters, and we have now brown rot. And at the beginning, it's very, very hard and brittle, and it forms almost like little bricks. And you can see this is the lignin left over. And now it's being decomposed by brown rot fungi. And it's quite brittle, but at times it's still very hard, not like the cellulose that I've shown earlier. So really hardy. And you can see the mycelium right here. This white stuff. It's dry and dead now. It's pretty much needing rain to be reactivated again and start decomposing. But so while some parts are brittle and I can break them, this is like, no matter how much force I put in, it still needs to go further. And once again, you see evidence of beetles and other creatures making perfect little holes, little burrowing insects. Once again, look at this. Look how beautiful that becomes. Total brittleness, total food for the soil, mulch. Organic matter that's going to get now incorporated with the worms and other things and taken down to the ground and feeding trees, recycling all of that organic matter back down.
So were you saying that the white
rot?
White rot?
Yep.
Comes first and then this brown rot?
It depends.
Or is
it really,
either
and
or?
I don't really know, yeah. And there's different species of white rots and brown rots at the same time. Sometimes you see a log and it's got all different species growing on it. So I'm not really sure what happens first or whether it happens simultaneously. So it all depends on the spores, I suppose, when they land and how much moisture there is and when the mycelium gets activated and how that all pans out. Would it be easier to decompose the cellulose first? I'm not sure, because it depends on the fungi that are actually doing the decomposition at the time and what they are, and maybe species dependent on types of wood, you know. But I can definitely still feel this really hard, here we go. This is lignin. So this allows the tree to grow tall because it's such a hardy structure. It's like little building blocks allowing trees to grow, whereas ferns and things like that don't have, you know, softer plants don't have this lignin component. They're mostly cellulose. Beautiful, very beautiful wood. Yep, so now it's going to go back to the soil.
Forests are in a constant cycle of growth and decomposition through fungi. As the decomposers break down dead fallen trees, they provide organic matter to the soil. Some of the nutrients are recycled by symbiotic fungi growing on the roots of most plants. These fungi feed those recycled nutrients to the growing trees and other plants.
we just have some fungal action here as well. And some mycelium happening there. You can see the white new babies sprouting, and all connected to the mycelium that's growing inside the wood. And all working together to decompose it down to the ground and back to the minerals to feed trees. So the trees kind of get turned, decompose and feed all the other trees. And the fungi do that role of decomposition. This was a giant bunya tree. Beautiful. Nothing's lost, all those nutrients are going to be recycled back to the other trees. And the fungi on the roots will take those nutrients to the tree, and we'll talk about that soon.
Termites play a similar role to fungi in nutrient cycling, and some termite species cultivate fungi gardens in their mounds. The termites feed the fungi with plant matter to predigest it and increase its nutritional value.
So, Sandra, I've always thought that it was termites that make the wood break down like this.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Di. The whole idea is, from my understanding, is that termites kind of do a similar job, but in other ecosystems where there's drought and fungi cannot grow. So you can see them often in pastures. They're underground and they're doing a similar job. They break down the woody bits and everything else underground, whereas fungi do it above ground. So they basically sort of another system of breakdown.
In drier areas.
Yes, in drier areas, because there's no moisture. You need to have some sort of an organism that's going to do this. And by the way, they farm fungi, termites. So they have fungal gardens. I'm not sure if all species do it. And also in the gut as well, they've got different organisms that can break down the cellulose. So they don't actually eat the cellulose of the plants. They allow that cellulose to be first decomposed by fungi, by the fungi that they garden, and then they consume the fungi. So it's a beautiful habitat for the fungi to live there. It's a very old and ancient symbiotic relationship, and often the fungi will not actually have another way to live other than with the termite. And it's a very specific one-on-one, and only that fungi with that specific termite will live in that symbiosis for millions of years.
So in a termite mound you'll find fungi?
Yes, in a termite mound we'll find fungi, yes.
Wow.
The mycelium is the vegetative form in which fungi exist. Its white thread-like structure is composed of fungal cells called hyphae. These cells contain enzymes and acids capable of breaking down wood and even rock into minerals.
So what have you got there, Sandra?
I'm just looking at this mycelium. See, all the bits are actually held together by this rope stuff, and that's called mycelium. And while it's decomposing in the organic matter, it's making these threads and growing through. And these threads are composed of these very thin, long cells called hyphae, which we can't see with our naked eye. But as they conglomerate together and come together, they form this network of mycelium. And this spreads and spreads, and actually as it devours the substrate or the material that it eats, it just glues it. It's one of nature's greatest glues. And you can see that when you have it in mulch particularly, and everything's stuck together and nice and wet, and the mycelium binds all the organic matter together. And it's just a very wonderful material. And you know, it's quite strong. I'm pulling quite hard here, and these are just threads. And in certain fungi, they can actually decompose rock as they excrete all these enzymes and other molecules to actually decompose things. They can get even minerals out of rocks, and this is how soil is formed. So while this species is eating organic matter, there are other species underground. It's oftentimes the ones that are actually symbiotic with tree roots. To feed the tree, they can get minerals from the ground. There's so much mineral in every rock, there's no need to fertilize anything. Forests are fertilized by, or trees are actually fed by these mycorrhizal symbiotic networks where the fungi grow on the roots, decompose rock, take those minerals into plant available form, transform those basically and then take them up into the root and feed the plant, and the plant then in exchange gives carbohydrates and proteins and things that they receive from the plant. And yeah, they're just great decomposers of rocks and hardy materials. So they are world's greatest recyclers and greatest soil formers. And of course, you can see that in a beautiful forest. How does the forest survive without being fertilized? Well, the fungi are the farmers fertilizing the plants. So a beautiful example of how nature works, and understanding it might bring some light, shed some light on current ways we grow things and fertilize things where we just don't need to do it because the fungi are there to do it for us. And for nature that's been doing it for millions of years, potentially billions.
The fruiting bodies of fungi provide food and shelter for a myriad of life forms, such as invertebrates like insects and snails, as well as food for mammals such as bettongs and other macropods.
What you can see is little beetles in there. So all these creatures are getting fed by this fungi that's decomposing. And that just shows just the interdependence of organisms upon each other. You can see that this mushroom is not only good for dispersal of spores of its kind, but also a food source for all these creatures. So a very important symbiosis occurs in everything in nature. Nothing's wasted, everything's used. And as the molds and the insects decompose this baby, it will go down to the ground and feed the trees. All those nutrients will once again be recycled. So the fungi are the decomposers and the best recyclers, but also they get recycled, which is so cool. I'm just trying to see whether we can see any more of those beetles in there. Probably by breaking this up a little bit, we could see some more. Yep, of course. And it looks like potentially a springtail, which is a whole nother ballgame of organisms that we know very little about. So rotting fungi are awesome to really look at. And you often take photos of fungi and you don't realize until it's on the big screen that there are all these creatures in there living and thriving. And there are people that study these relationships and see what beetles live in these. But of course, it's not just beetles, it's all kinds of organisms. Fungi are just great at providing habitat and food, and yeah, and I mean, you know, everything's just as exciting. It's just we're focusing on fungi here, but you can imagine that all of nature has these incredible things that we don't see, but they are happening, and it's just a ball of treasure, really, you know. I've seen lots of beetles earlier. I think they've left.
Yeah.
And, you know, the microscopic creatures we just can't see. But anyway, thanks, little mushroom.
Decomposer fungi create habitat and food for a variety of soil life forms, such as millipedes, slaters, cockroaches, and an unknown diversity of microscopic creatures.
So we just lifted this rotting log up and found that there's all these creatures underneath as well. I think this is a millipede, pretty sure. They eat, they're shredders, and they eat tremendous amounts. I think something like 4 times their body weight in organic matter. So churning it down, and what's that little one? It's like a little pill bug. Yeah. Oh, it's so cute. It's becoming a little pill.
Curling up.
So it's a type of, sort of a relative, the pill bug of a millipede. Oh, there's a slater. I think they might be the same, although they look a little bit different. So it's interesting what happens once these fungi do this job of decomposing. Look at all the life that they bring into the soil, and that goes all the way down to microscopic level. There's more biodiversity in a spoon of soil than probably in the world. Like, that tremendous amount of biodiversity that's created. Soils have so much life that we don't even know about, haven't studied. I think it's like 0.01% of soil life is actually identified. So yeah, it's just mind-boggling just how much life there actually is that we have no idea. The biodiversity is so tremendous, so unknown. It's like a whole universe to discover. And yet we travel to the moon and we have no idea, and look at stars, but we don't know what's underneath our own feet. But that doesn't mean we can't discover these things, and I hope we do, because I find this world of soil absolutely fascinating.
So Sandra and I have just spent the day here at the Bunyas looking for fungi. It's been awesome for me because I knew nothing and she's so knowledgeable. Do you want to tell us something, Sandra, about what we've found today?
Yeah, and I'd like to introduce why we even did this exploration and why we talked about fungi and why would we even look at fungi in the forest. And the desire behind that is based on the fact that fungi are very unknown, especially in Australia. We know like maybe 5% of the fungi we have. And these rainforests such as the Bunya Mountains are so lush in fungi still, you know, and we're losing forests rapidly, and yet fungi are so important to the ecosystems, to formation of soil, decomposition, feeding plants, feeding trees. It is so important to actually study them and the ecosystem within which they live, and understanding the processes that go on when it comes to their role in ecosystems. What are the processes? Why are they there? What species are doing what? You know, and understanding those is so important. So I feel like we need to really get out there and start understanding these organisms as very special, very vital to the survival of the forest, in rain creation, in feeding ecosystems, in communicating across ecosystems. So this is why we went out today and had a little bit of a intro to what fungi do in ecosystems and the types that we have found today.
Well, I found it fascinating. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you.